Can you believe that a simple idea scribbled down in a New York hotel room over 60 years ago would one day grow into a cultural juggernaut, captivating millions and revolutionizing how we watch sports? Fantasy football, once a creative pastime for a few friends, is now a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's become a cultural force, and one of those reasons is that people scream around their TVs watching every Sunday, and it gives people a reason to watch even that garbage time of football games. From its humble beginnings in 1962, when Oakland businessman Bill Winkenbach and a couple of his colleagues dreamed up the game during a Raiders trip, fantasy football has evolved into a multi-billion-dollar industry on the side of not just football, but sports in general. It's no longer just a niche hobby, it's a nationwide obsession. Today, fantasy football is more than just a game. It's strategy, it's probability, it's obsession, and it's a little luck. It's become more focused on data, gambling, and aspects of the game that never was thought about before. It transforms ordinary fans into virtual owners and general managers who meticulously build and manage their own teams. Every yard gain, every touchdown, every interception, these are all key factors for fans who are watching the games and rooting for their players. No longer is there loyalty to just teams, there's loyalty to players. Even if Joe Burrow is playing your favorite team, or Jalen Hurts is going up for a touchdown against the Cowboys and you're a Cowboys fan, you are rooting for those players because you want to win your fantasy football games. At its core, fantasy football allows people to experience the thrill of running a team. Participants draft real life players from the NFL and create their own virtual squads. A 40-yard touchdown by Christian McCaffrey isn't just good news for the 49ers, it's good news for somebody's playoff run in fantasy football. There are several ways to play the game. The traditional redraft leagues, owners draft fresh each year, building a team from scratch and competing on a week-to-week basis. There are also keeper or dynasty leagues where teams add players each year and eliminate players from their teams, holding on to specific players and building a dynasty franchise around it. There's also the world of daily fantasy, which is where a lot of those gambling aspects come in, which were built and made popular by things like DraftKings and FanDuel, with prizes, money, and also bragging rights. Fantasy football is so flexible, and that's what's made it such a dynamic aspect in the world of sports and fandom. It's because anyone can play. Even if you have no knowledge of the NFL or football, you can look up a couple stats and look up a couple players and get a good understanding. You can build a team. You see workers, co-workers, friends, family, even childhood friends playing this game, and they all will have a good understanding of who they're rooting for at the end of the day. It's not just a game anymore, it's an entire economy. The entire world of fantasy football has expanded to just not the apps or the websites. It's become subscription bases, it's become magazines, it's become focused on paid for subscriptions to things like ESPN, NFL, Yahoo. All of those aspects have created a unique feature surrounding fantasy football. Drafting, but where did it all begin? How did this obsession start? Well, the first modernized version of fantasy football originated in 1962 with the creation of the Greater Oakland Professional Pigskin Prognosticators League. This league was founded by Bill Winkenbach, an Oakland Raiders co-owner, and a group of his colleagues and friends. The first draft of this league took place in August of 1963. Once it was seen that the league would be popular and they developed rules around it, it started to spread. Things like pro football journalists, season ticket holders, and even American Football League fans and players were interested in it. It became a concept that would spread by word of mouth through bars, and early leagues would start appearing on things like college campuses and even in sports bars. And then it all would explode due to the internet. The internet in the 90s and 2000s is what made fantasy football what we know today. If it wasn't for Yahoo Sports and the Yahoo Sports football drafts, we wouldn't see fantasy football like we know today. Yahoo Sports really made the game take off with all their intricate data, stats, and the ability to easily draft players. Made the leagues expand even further. No longer did you have to have a league around an area. No longer did it have to be everyone getting together at a sports bar or a college dorm room. You could now draft from your house. And everyone could have the same fair advantages of knowing what players were good or what players were bad based off the data and the rankings from Yahoo. This spread even further, and their growth would continue throughout the mid 2000s. Things like Sports Illustrated, ESPN Magazine, and eventually the Pro Football Fantasy Magazine would evolve the sport even further for fans. It would allow them to get a better understanding of what players might have more potential than others and really grasp what data they need to be looking at. It really opened up new doors for fantasy football. But a question that comes up a lot is, where did this concept even come from? Well, fantasy football and the idea and the concept of using player stats is nothing new. Stratomatic was another game that was developed in the 1960s for baseball, and it really focused on data, player stats, and understanding where they are better than others. And this made it really interesting because this was more of a head-to-head card game aspect. It was seen more of a board game, more of something you could sit around the kitchen table and play, rather than collecting stats going head-to-head each week like fantasy football. But the concept was there. The data aspects were there. And actually, many people call Stratomatic for baseball the first fantasy baseball leagues. So, those go hand in hand together, and you can even attribute some growth in fantasy football and how we think about fantasy football to that game of Stratomatic. And if you ever played that game, I'm sure you've realized now that it's very similar to the concepts of fantasy football and fantasy sports in general. It's just more of one that you could bring around with you and play on the go. In today's world, fantasy football is a multi-billion-dollar industry. But looking back, you have to always remember those humble beginnings in the 1960s where there was a spreading of fantasy football fandom throughout California and then throughout the United States. The concept was there. The excitement was there. There was a reason to watch the players. But if it wasn't for the internet, if it wasn't for apps, if it wasn't for online platforms, fantasy football would not be as popular as we know it today. It would not be the billion-dollar industry that we know today. And for one company in particular, if it was not for Yahoo, we would not know fantasy football in the way we know it today. Now it's being dominated by things like ESPN, Sleeper, and all those betting apps that have daily fantasy. Yahoo Sports has fallen to the wayside. Not many people even play Yahoo Fantasy Sports anymore. But if it was not for Yahoo, we would not have over 30 million players in the United States playing fantasy football each and every year. Thank you so much for watching. Let us know in the comments below what your favorite fantasy football platform has been, and if you remember those early days in the 90s and 2000s of writing every single player down as he sat in your living room or dorm room or anywhere else and rooting for those players. Thanks so much for watching Believable Truths.